Hey, so a friend of mine posted a link from the BBC about the headline was, "Does the fashion industry have a cultural appropriation problem?" And it featured a few examples that they were citing as controversies around so-called cultural appropriation. So, for example, the model Gigi Hadid sported dreadlocks in one design. It showed a white guy with a Sikh turban, and there were other examples. Gigi Hadid, of course, is herself from Arab American background. Um, and I mention that because it shows that anyone can be targeted by this. It's often directed at white people, but it's something that can be targeted at anyone. Um, I'm very skeptical of the whole idea of cultural appropriation. However, with the fashion industry, I sort of see to some extent where they're coming from, i.e., where the critics are coming from. Because if you're taking, for example, Native American designs and you're not using Native American models, um, and they're making profit from that, I can sort of see the why that would be controversial. But I think that's the exception. I think generally, when people are accused of so-called cultural appropriation, it's complete nonsense. I don't like the concept because the sort of people who whinge about cultural appropriation are the sort of people who will find racism in everything. They're the sort of people who will always find a reason to be offended. And I think it's pathetic. I think they need to get a hobby. I mean, this is why it's a problem and why it's a flawed idea. Because where do you draw the line? If you look at cultural appropriation in its absolute notion, its absolute form, then everyone is culturally appropriating in some way. I mean, anyone who uses the English language is culturally appropriating British culture because the English language originates in England. That sounds ridiculous, right? Because it's an international language, and it is ridiculous. So, you're not going to say that anyone who speaks English offends Britain. That's just crazy. But in my view, cultural appropriation is a crazy concept. Where do you draw the line? Would you have a situation where someone living in the UK, for example, could never have Indian takeaway, could not drive a Toyota vehicle, could not have, oh, I don't know, Italian spaghetti. I mean, where do you draw the limit? Really, it's to me, it's just the latest example of overly sensitive identity politics trying to get its nasty little totalitarianism, imposing it onto other people. That's what it is. At its core, identity politics is divisive, but it's also controlling, and that's why I have no respect for it. Um, I appreciate some people might look a bit out of place, but when we're talking about ordinary individuals, um, so what if a white guy likes rap music or black R&B music? So what if a black person likes something that's deemed to be more traditionally white, like I don't know, classical music? Um, So what? Surely it's about appreciating different tastes. You know what's ironic about this? What I find ironic is the very same people whinging about cultural appropriation are the very same people who would say, oh, there's not enough diversity. And if someone only likes like their own white culture or their own black culture, whatever it may be, then they say that person isn't open-minded. So these crybabies, you can't please them. They'll always find a reason to complain. I recall a while back, a young American woman, white woman, wore a Chinese style qipao to her prom. And she got a really rough time. I thought it was disgusting actually because I saw it as bullying. And most of the critics were either Chinese Americans or white liberals who were giving her a hard time, regressives. Why? Because it happens to be a Chinese style and she's white, so she can't enjoy it. I mean, China's a huge country. There's no risk of it being taken away. It was just a young woman wanting to enjoy her night out, and I think it was disgusting how she was bullied over that. I made a video about it at the time, actually. But the funny thing is, the people who were getting offended, like I say, a lot of them were Chinese Americans. Chinese people themselves don't care. They really don't care. In fact, they'd probably be flattered that a Westerner would find that beautiful. The Qipao is beautiful. It's made of silk usually. It's yeah, women look beautiful in it, so that's presumably why she chose it. Um, but it's funny here in China. My national flag, the country I come from, the UK, is widely used in fashion. It's seen as very trendy, more than any other national flag apart from the Chinese flag itself. Um, I mean, it's everywhere. You can see it on the design of motorbike shells, the plastic casing around them. I don't know the proper word, but it's widely used. It's on fashion. It's on people's t-shirts. It's everywhere. Now, am I going to be offended as a British person? Oh, it's culturally appropriate in the UK. No, I'm actually quite flattered. Oh, that's nice. My national flag is seen as something that is aesthetically pleasing. Now, there's certain issues of respect around national flags. Obviously, if people were using it for some disrespectful reason, that would be a different matter. But I don't think fashion is necessarily disrespectful. Some people might be a bit puritanical about that, like a national flag should only be used for formal occasions. I don't agree with that. I think that a national flag can be symbolic of culture. So when the British flag is used across China, it shows an appreciation of British culture. So far from cultural appropriation, or even if it is cultural appropriation, I don't care. I'm not offended. And that's just an example. So really, people need to get a hobby. They need to really. I just think it's pathetic, because if you take the argument to its extreme, what are you left with? Everyone keeping to their own and not appreciating other cultures, and that's the opposite of being open-minded, surely. Because the same people would be on the forefront of saying, "Oh, you're not. You can't please them." That's what I'm getting at. You just people like that are going to find a reason to whinge no matter what, and I've no respect for them. Um, just get a life. I mean, just because your culture, your ethnic demographic had the foundations of a particular type of music or food or whatever it is, why does that mean that no one else can appreciate it? No one else can enjoy it? Is it really, really hurting you that a white person or an Asian person or a black person is appreciating a culture that isn't their own? I mean, we live in an interconnected world. With the fashion thing, I sort of understand because there's a profit issue there. Um, but even that, I think, it's typical of the BBC to be pushing it because the BBC loves identity politics and it's a pretty left wing organization. So that kind of goes hand in hand. But anyway, let me know your thoughts.